Hello and welcome to everybody joining us here today. Today we'll be focusing on how to tailor your digital content strategy to reach and engage with the right people. So we'll be digging really deeply into who your audience is as well as who your target audience is. So here's today's agenda on your screens now. So firstly, the members of the Bridge team will be introducing ourselves, and then we'll be going through today's learning outcomes. We'll also start at the beginning by asking you, why do you need to know your audience? And then we'll be sharing how to collect and use audience insights. And after that, it'll be time to introduce you to audience personas using our Lightful AI tool. And then we'll then be sharing how to use these personas to tailor your content to your target audiences. And then, of course, we'll be ending with questions and some next steps. So I hope that sounds great to everyone. Before we get started, I want to introduce myself. I'm Simran. I'm sure you're all familiar with my face by now. And I've worked in social media and outreach for 5 years, where I worked directly on trying to understand our audience in the different charities I worked in, which helped a lot in forming our strategy, our tone of voice, language, and imagery we kind of chose to communicate them with via our content. So it's definitely an important topic to kind of focus on and one that you won't regret spending some time on now. And I'm also joined by the lovely Jasmine.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you online. Thanks for sharing your messages in the chat. It's lovely to see where everyone is joining from. And I know I've met quite a few of you in your onboarding one-to-ones so far, which has been a real pleasure. And just a little bit about me. I used to work in the nonprofit sector before joining Lightful. And most recently, I worked at an international organization working in disaster response. So I've done lots of reactive social media content, emergency campaigns, crisis communication plans, and all of those different things. So always happy to talk more about those in one-to-ones. But like Simran, the kind of focus on who you're speaking to online has really underpinned lots of what I've done across different digital channels, across my different social media platforms. It's a really important topic. So we're looking forward to going through that in detail with you today. But I'll let Simran now talk through our learning outcomes.
Thank you. So yes, by the end of the session, you'll be able to define who your target audiences are, gather and interpret audience insights, and also begin developing your tailored personas, which I hope you're all excited for. So why do you need to know your audience? A very important question. So understanding your audience is a cornerstone of any successful digital strategy. Before crafting your approach, it's essential to understand both your existing audience and also who you would like for your audience to be, so your target audience. That's who they are, how they currently engage with your content, and also how you'd like them to engage in the future. You can't build an effective strategy without knowing who you're aiming to reach. And that's where audience segmentation also comes in. By dividing your audience into meaningful groups, so that's whether it's being based on demographics, behaviors, or needs, you can begin to develop your personas, which bring those segments to life. And these personas help guide decisions around messaging, tone, and platform selection. So in today's session, we'll walk you through this process step by step, from identifying your target audience to building personas that can inform and strengthen your digital communications. And every organization at this masterclass today can improve how they engage their audiences online. And that's why we're all here. You may already share powerful and well-crafted content, but even if you do, I'm sure you've experienced times when your content didn't really land the way you hoped. And maybe it didn't reach the right group, or perhaps it simply didn't spark the interaction that you expected. But that's not unusual, and it often comes down to not fully understanding your audience. And understanding your audience is the foundation of strategic communications. When we understand who we're speaking to, we can tailor our content to meet their needs and interests, motivations, and communication preferences. And this makes our messages more relevant, more useful, and ultimately more effective. Ultimately, when we deeply understand our audience, we can meet them where they are, and that is when our content really resonates. So I'm going to get a quick pulse check by launching a poll, and it'll be great to see where you're at all at. Let me just make sure I'm launching the right one. Um, there we go. So do you feel confident in identifying your target audiences? Who are they, and how well do you think you understand them? So take a moment to answer the poll questions that should have popped up on your screens now. Don't worry if you're unsure. There's no right or wrong answer. We just kind of want to get a sense check on how you're feeling today. So do you know who your target audiences are, and how confident do you feel about understanding and communicating with your audience online? So I can see a lot of us are in the middle range, so you know a bit about them, but not a lot, which is a good starting point, but there's definitely no wrong place to start with us here today. And in terms of confidence, we're a bit at the lower end. Again, a very good starting point as we're going to be starting right at the foundations today, so don't worry about that. So I'm going to put that to the side and then ask you another question, and that is, who are you trying to reach online? And that'd be really interesting to see who your target audiences are. Is it your donors, your service users, funders, or volunteers? So what I'd like for you to do is if you have your phone on you, your mobile phone, all you need to do is point your camera of your phone on the QR code that you see on the screen today. And that should take you straight to the page where you can then enter and answer this question, or you could join at slido.com and then enter that number that you see underneath, and that should take you straight to this page. But if that is too complicated for you, feel free to just post it in the chat as that would be equally as good. So let us know, who are you trying to reach online and who is your target audience? I can see one person is typing, which is great. So one person has said their target audience is their donors, which I'm sure everyone is on the same page with that today. It'd be great if you guys can be a little bit more specific, maybe tailor it to your mission. So what do your donors look like? Try to give us as much information as you can, as then we'll be building on this as we move throughout the session. We've got two people saying donors, which is great, as we have a lot of content on fundraising coming up in the later months. See, three people are typing. So there we've got a specific one. Someone said supporters of women and girls' education, which is great. So you've kind of segmented this audience in terms of their interests and what they're passionate about, which is really good. And then someone that said Sudanese youth 18 to 45. That's interesting, and that's an interesting age bracket for the youth, but also very great that you've already segmenting them by age. And then we've got another person mentioning donors and the Sudanese public. So also good knowing what kind of area and geographically you're looking at. And then we've got Ahmed who's posted in the chat saying their focus point for their audiences are donors, INGOs, organizations, and foundations. That's really good that you've already segmented them in terms of kind of the area focus and maybe like their status on which kind of areas they function in. And I guess from looking at yours, your target channel seems to be LinkedIn. We're getting a lot more answers coming in. We've got youth women activists, which is really interesting. And we've also got donors, teachers, private sector actors, local government officials, and teachers. You're ahead of the game with that one. It seems like you've already done a lot of your segmentation work. So thank you everyone so much for sharing. Keep these in mind as we'll be building on these as we move throughout the call. So let's ask a big question, and that is, what is a target audience? A target audience is a specific group of people that you want to reach, and I'm sure you already know that from the answers you've given. They are typically the ones that are most interested in your cause and are likely to take the actions that you want, whether that's donating, volunteering, or using your services. And your target audiences shapes your messaging, the platforms you use, and even the timing of your outreach. So it's really important to stop and think about who your target audience is, even if you think you already know them, because your audience does change over time and also from digital platform to platform. And as much as we like to be able to reach everyone, your target audience can't be everyone. You can't target everyone with bespoke content and communications. So you really need to spend time in terms of getting specific and thinking about the key characteristics of your target audience and which platforms they are best targeted on. As we've seen from people that have already been targeting their audience in terms of their age, their interests. So that's already a really good start. If you are unsure about who your target audience is, then a great place to start is by revisiting your goals. So ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve and who is most likely to help me get there? For example, if your goal is to increase online donations from corporate donors by 10% by the end of 2025, then we want you to think carefully about where that audience spends their time. Should you be focusing on Instagram, where you may have a younger or more general following? Or maybe do you think LinkedIn is a better platform given its professional focus and strong corporate user base? So we want you to always link your audience decisions back to your SMART goals, the ones that we developed last week, and think about who's already engaging with your organization. So, who donates, who uses your services, and who attends your events or shares your content. Also, looks for shared characteristics. Think about them along this spectrum of age, gender, location, occupation, which is sometimes overlooked, hobbies and interests, as well as education level. And these traits help you build a profile of your current audience and also helps you identify gaps or opportunities that you may not have considered before. So most organizations have more than one target audience, and that's completely normal. It's actually something that we do encourage. At a high level, nonprofits often engage with three broad groups. So you have your service users, and that's people who benefit from your programs or services. And you also have your supporters, and that's those who engage, share content, or volunteer. And then you also have your donors or funders, which is a target group for many of you here today. And this is your individuals or institutions who contribute financially. But you could also be even more targeted and you could segment these broad groups into smaller subcategories. So if we were to break up donors, you can maybe be super specific and think about individual donors, major donors, and corporate partners. And then if we were to break up your supporters, we could break them according to new followers versus long-term advocates. And if we look at your service users, this can be broken up according to age, location, or specific needs. And how you define these segments is up to you, but they should always align with your current goals and priorities. You'll always want to do some light research, whether that's through analytics, surveys, or conversations, to understand who's engaging with you now and who would you like to reach in the future. And also remember, you don't need to have just one target audience. Your audience will also likely change over time. And as your organization goals shift, your audience, the audience groups that you prioritize should also shift. So it's always a very ever-changing landscape. Audience understanding isn't something that you could just tick off once you've done it here today. It's something that you build and you refine and revisit regularly. So definitely important to keep that in mind. So I know a lot of you have already started doing this very well. We're going to be looking a little bit more into segmentation. So segmenting helps you move from broad messaging to content that resonates a lot more deeply with different types of people. So you don't have to stick to those three segments that we just went through, but maybe you don't have donors or service users, and you can actually maybe segment your audience groups, however is most suitable for your organization. For instance, you might decide to segment your audience based on demographic, maybe based on their age, gender, income, or occupation. Again, you will need to think about how your communication would then be tailored for each segment that you create and how this will link back to your overall strategic goals. So you might decide that segmenting based on geography suits you better. And so if you offer services in different parts of the world, then you can segment your communications for each region. You can research which platforms are most utilized by each region and also make sure that you tailor your content to the audience groups living in that region using that platform. There's also psychographic segmentation, which is best for you. Sorry, I forgot to click. There's also psychographic segmentation, which is best if you want to segment your audience based on their interests, lifestyles, or values. Maybe you offer volunteering opportunities for different projects that you're running. So it's good to evaluate what interests and values that the people who would take part in each program have and try to tailor your content based on your findings. Finally, you have your behavioral. Now, this is based on consumers' previous behaviors with your organization. And some of the main traits within the segmentation type includes product and service knowledge, purchase patterns, and awareness of your organization, as well as service rating. So this is all stuff that maybe you haven't considered, but something that you could really easily measure, as opposed to maybe psychographic segmentation, which will maybe take a little bit more deeper research. So, when you truly understand your audience, you can communicate with purpose and precision. It allows you to deliver the right message to the right people at the right time and in the right way. And this level of focus is key to prompting the outcomes that you care about, whether that's securing donations, encouraging volunteer signups, or mobilizing advocates. And internal communication with specific audiences drives real results. It also means that you can make smarter use of your resources rather than spending your efforts, spreading your efforts thin or trying to reach people who are unlikely to connect with your mission. You can instead make sure that you're focusing on the audiences who are most likely to engage and take action. So, one common pitfall that we see is when organizations post the same content across every social media platform. It might seem efficient and maybe the easiest thing to do when you have so much to juggle. Maybe you have a lot of meetings, a lot to get through during the day. But it does, I'm sure you probably, if you do that, will know that it does often miss the mark. And this is because your audiences on each platform are quite different. So your LinkedIn users may be more professionally focused and mission driven, whereas your Instagram users might prefer emotional storytelling or visual engaging updates. And then your Facebook may serve older or more community-based supporters. And so a one size fits all approach risks underperforming across all those platforms. But that doesn't mean that you then need to create completely different content for every channel because we know that's not really realistic. But what is achievable and impactful is making simple, thoughtful adjustments. So maybe rewriting captions to suit the platform's tone. Maybe you have the same image that you use on Facebook as you do on LinkedIn, but maybe adjusting the type of way you're saying what you're meaning to say in the caption. Or you could even choose imagery that resonates with each audience. Maybe numbers will be more striking on LinkedIn, whereas more face-to-face personal imagery will be better on Instagram, and also highlighting different aspects of the same story depending on the platform. This small shift towards intentionally um, created content can significantly increase your reach, engagement, and results. Yeah, exactly, Ahmed. On X, your posts have to be short. So maybe trying to think about how you would be splitting up what you want to say according to that platform. So maybe you could do a thread. Maybe instead of going really deep into the why, it's more about the what the people can do instead. So definitely think about adjusting your messaging and tones there. And yeah, using hashtags to make sure your tweet or X post is reaching the right people. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking, but let's take a moment now, and I'd love to ask you, what challenges do you face when trying to define your audience? So this can be one of the trickiest part of digital strategy, trying to think about where you can improve. But yeah, let us know, what challenges do you face when trying to reach your audience, and why do you think you're not reaching them now, or not doing it so well? So think about your target audience. You could either drop your thoughts in the chat, or if anyone would like to come off mute here today and share on camera, that would also be very lovely. See, Sam has raised their hand, so yeah, please do come off mute and share.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for your time and for your efforts. Sometimes one of our problems is that our target audience would lack the internet access because of Sudan's war, and some of the times we use our social media as an advocacy tool, and we fail to engage with both audience at the same time. So curating uh, uh, like wording our post or wording our message in order to serve both our donors and also the local community is kind of hard. So we would need to make multiple messages in multiple ways. Uh,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. If you're finished, Assam, I think yeah, definitely a bad internet connection uh, is definitely a big barrier to overcome. But something that can also be considered is trying to cater your content to kind of suit that bandwidth. So maybe less videos, and even when you're focusing on
and
emails. Oh, see, I'll let you carry on now. Think there may be bad internet connection at play here today as well. Um, Isam, if you would like to, you could finish off what you're trying to say in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think also, I know diversifying your content for your donors and your local community is a hard one, but something that can easily be overcome by trying to think about your mission and what your core driver is, and what you're trying to communicate. So maybe you're trying to say the same thing, but for your donors, it could be more stats based, whereas for your local community, it could be showing more in the form of storytelling, or kind of thinking about how they personally would be impacted. I'm going to move on now, as I can see that we've got a lot more comments coming into the chat, but please do finish off what you're trying to say in the chat if you can, or do book in a one-to-one, as I'd love to kind of explore that further with you. So thank you. Okay, so we've got a lot coming in on the chat. We've got Legacy, who has said their diversity, the diversity of the audience is what proves as a challenge, as well as being unable to know their interests fully, as we are working on persons with disabilities. So tailoring messages may not be possible sometimes, even though we try our best. That's moved. Yeah, I think that's definitely a really hard challenge, and a good one. A good starting point is that you already know what your challenge is. So kind of tailoring messages to people, working on people with disabilities. And I guess, yeah, that it's such a broad spectrum, so trying to cater to all of that is really difficult. But as I mentioned, maybe with Assam is trying to think about your main goal and mission and thinking about where all these different interests may align according to your own goal. So like, what is it that you're offering that kind of connects with all of them, all those different interests? So we've got, I'll look into one more, and that's Frana Bittar, who has said, it's difficult to reach decision makers in donor agencies, effectively disseminating success stories and human interest stories, and accurately introducing the organization and its objectives, as well as building advanced outreach strategies. That is, that's a really big one and really well thought through. I'm going to focus on reaching decision makers in donor agencies and kind of disseminating success stories as well as human interest stories. It seems that you've already got that. I think it's also, I think it's remembering that you don't have to tick off everything in one post. One post can cater more to getting across your human interest stories, as you mentioned, and the other could be more focused on showing your impact and the success there. So just trying to remember not one post doesn't have to do it all. Great. So thank you everyone for sharing. I love that everyone's taking part. Please do book in a one-to-one if you'd kind of like us to look into this further. As I can see some really interesting audience groups in the chat. I'm going to move on for the sake of time. And I kind of want to focus a little bit more on what may be specific to all of you here today, and that is when a crisis or a disaster occurs. And when that does, your audience definitely changes, as well as how they engage. That will also change too. And this is also important to consider when you're doing your audience work. So as I mentioned before, there are three broad categories to typically consider are your donors, service users, and your followers and supporters. But in this case, in case of disaster or an emergency, that may change. And so when that does, that maybe you could shift your focus into the following three main categories. And that is first, your emergency donors. So these are the people who act fast, often within hours or days of an appeal going live. And that they're often driven by emotion, empathy, and the desire to make an immediate difference. They want to know what's happening, how they can help, and that their contribution will have real impact. So your digital content for this group should be clear, transparent, and action-oriented. We want you to show the need, show the impact, and also make it easy to donate or share because they respond best to strong visuals, short updates, and trustworthy calls to action. And then we have quite an overlooked audience group, which is your diaspora community. So these audiences often have a deep and emotional and personal connection to your cause, most especially if to something that's happening on the ground. They may be geographically distant, but are closely tied through family, identity, or heritage. So these people are typically very powerful digital amplifiers. So maybe Assam, this is a group for you to consider if you haven't already. If you know that internet connection isn't good on the ground for your local community or local donors, try looking abroad and seeing where they may have better internet connection because they really are powerful digital amplifiers and they share updates within with their own networks, sometimes fundraising peer-to-peer and also advocating for support. So for this group, it's about connection and credibility. So it's about thinking about whether you want to communicate with them by speaking English or using a local language that may be best for them, or cultural references as well is a good way to communicate with them. Celebrate community leadership as well as acknowledging the role they play in sustaining long-term recovery. We do encourage you to research your diaspora networks, and we'll be looking deeper into how you can do this in your session on working with influencers and ambassadors a little bit later on this program. But if this is a topic you'd like to delve further into, please do book a one-to-one. Another area we'll be exploring more deeply in that workshop is journalists and influencers. And these audiences help you shape the public narrative and expand your reach. So they're not donors, but they are gatekeepers to visibility. And what they need most is accuracy, timelines, and access to credible sources. So when you do build relationships with journalists, for example, especially local or diaspora reporters, we want you to focus on providing ready-to-use facts, verified visuals, and consistent messaging. And this not only increases coverage, but also reduces misinformation. So these categories are always worth keeping in mind when thinking about building your personas, which we'll be looking a little bit further into later on. So that's enough of me talking. I'm now going to hand it over to Jasmine for audience insights.
Great, thanks, Simran. And thank you everyone for sharing your challenges, your thoughts in the chat. It's been so interesting to have a read. And I thought what's interesting is quite a few of you have said you're not sure maybe how to unpack your audience data. You're not sure what channels they're most likely to be active on or what content they want to see. And so this section now on insights hopefully will really help with that. Because it's really important to learn more about your audiences. So you might have identified that you want to reach donors, you might have a general idea of your audience, but now we want to look in more depth and access insights that are available to us. And actually, you have access to data from platforms like Google Analytics, your email systems, or social media channels. And this can reveal a lot more about who is engaging with your content already. And this helps to give you clues about what you're already doing well, and also what you might need to do differently, how you might be able to reach and engage the specific audiences you're wanting to reach. And so this is all about using data to better understand your audience, knowing who they are, how they engage, and what actually resonates with them. And we often start with an idea of who we think our audience is, which is a great place to start, but then we need to use the data to confirm, refine, or maybe even challenge those ideas, but actually to give us a clearer picture of who's really interacting with our organization online and who we have the opportunity to interact with as well. So you might discover, for example, that your most engaged audience on Facebook is completely different from the sorts of people who are opening your emails. Or you might see that a group you thought you were reaching isn't engaging at all, and there might be some surprises in the data. But what's really helpful here is that these insights can then help you to focus your efforts on where they'll have the most impact. Also, it can help you to discover new audiences who might already be interested in your work, and perhaps new opportunities that you wouldn't have been aware of before. But then it also helps you to tailor your messaging more effectively to the people who you are reaching. So when we're talking about what channels, how to customize your content for your different channels, knowing more about your audiences will help you know what it is they want to see. So rather than guessing, the data lets us see who's engaging, who's listening online, and then be able to engage with them appropriately. So we're going to look now at where to find the data, how to interpret it, and then we'll look at how to use that in the strategic tool of audience personas, which we'll talk about shortly. So to begin with, I'd really encourage you to start off maybe this week by exploring the audience analytics that you already have access to. And this depends on how active you already are online, but I'm sure you'll have access to some kind of audience insights, which will help you to start building a clearer picture of who's already engaging with your content, but also, really importantly, how this compares to the audience groups you want to engage more in the future. And that will help you to think about what do you need to do to be engaging and reaching the right people. So we'll do an overview now, but then we'd be very happy to talk about this in one-to-ones, because everyone's audiences are different, everyone's data is different, and we can sit down together and go through that with you and help you to figure out who your audiences are. But you can start with the platforms that you already have access to. So of course you have the Lightful platform, you have built-in analytics tools for each social media channel that you use. You could also access Google Analytics and also any email platforms that you might be using already. So if you were to start with the Lightful platform, you can use this to look at how your content is performing across your different social media channels. And this helps you to identify which platforms are working best for reaching your audiences. And so then you can look at each platform individually using their internal analytics tools. So I'll show you in a moment an example of these, but looking at who's engaging with your posts, what types of posts are generating the most likes, shares, or comments. And this helps you know just what your audience finds most compelling on each channel and what to post more of. And once you've looked at your social media channels, you might like to look at Google Analytics to look at your website. And the analytics here at a glance can tell you within just a few minutes which platforms are driving the most traffic to your website, which pages people look at most frequently, what devices they use, how they behave once they arrive. And setting up Google Analytics can be a bit technical if you haven't done that before, so let us know if you need any help with that. And then finally, your email platforms. If you're sending out email marketing or email to different organizations, individuals, you can see insights like which subject lines prompt the most people to open your emails, which links are being clicked, which ones aren't, and also what time of day generates the highest level of engagement. So this is really helpful data because it ties into that behavioral segment that Simran mentioned earlier on, and it just helps you to learn a bit more about how people behave when you reach them. And then this helps you to tailor your outreach more effectively, be more strategic, invest time and energy in the things that are most likely to work. But if this is all totally new to you, then don't panic. We've got some resources available to you. So we have an e-learning course on Lightful Academy, which has an introduction to analytics, which might be helpful. Later, we'll talk in more detail about analytics with a dedicated masterclass. But in the meantime, like I said, this is a great topic for a one-to-one coaching call with the Lightful team, because we can help you find and understand your analytics as well. But I'm just going to quickly show you one that most of you would have access to if you have a Facebook page for your organization. Let me just pull up my example. So if you have a Facebook page and an Instagram page that are linked to a business account, you have access to the Meta Business Suite. And hopefully you can all find this easily, but if you need help, just let us know. And so just as a quick overview, I'm going to give you some pointers that I'd love you to all just have a look at, maybe spend 5-10 minutes doing this over the next couple of days. But what I'm going to start with, I'm on the homepage. There's lots and lots of information. I don't find it hugely helpful. I will head to the insights section here. And this gives me an overview of my performance of my content on Facebook and on Instagram. And it shows some highlights in the last week, but I can look at the overview of my content, and it shows me how my different posts have performed. It shows me my top content, and here it gives me a snapshot of actually which type of content is most popular based on views, based on interactions, and that helps me to know what my audience likes to see on my different channels. And then you can look at kind of your trends in results. You can see any key moments. You can look in a lot more detail at each post in the content section as well, so you can really go into that. But what I'd like everyone to look at is this audience section. So find out who is following you on Facebook and Instagram. So this shows the split of age, gender, location, and this is really helpful. I can then switch between Facebook and Instagram, and you can see how many people are in those different categories. And I'd really encourage you to compare that. So it's very unlikely that that will look exactly the same for both your Facebook and Instagram pages. So have a look at that, and have a scroll through, just seeing what information is available. Location as well, hopefully that will be relevant to where you are, but sometimes it can be quite surprising as well. But there's lots and lots there. But I think at a very first instance, look at that audience tab and just see, are there any surprises? Is there anything there that you didn't expect to see? Is there anything that, is going to change what you post or how you engage with people online going forwards? So we don't have time to go into loads of levels of detail on that, but we can go through step by step in any of your one-to-ones if you'd like. But if you have any specific questions about any of those platforms, feel free to post in the chat and we can go through those today as well. So we've looked at kind of where you can find the different data, but now we want to look at the types of data you can gather. So you've got quantitative data, which is the numbers. This gives you a measurable sense of how your audience is behaving. So people that have viewed a post, clicked a link, opened an email, those tangible actions. But to build a more complete picture, and actually probably to answer some of the questions that some of you have had in the chat, you also need qualitative data. And this is the context behind the numbers, and it helps you to understand the why behind the what. So this can come from surveys that you could send out. You can do interviews, focus groups, look at feedback that you get, whether through emails or social media. So your engagement might feel lower than you'd like it to be on social media and you're not sure why, but actually you could send out a survey. You might hear people say that your messaging feels too formal. Perhaps they don't see the content they want to see. Whatever it is really helpful, because that helps you to get a better picture of those people and understand why certain things are happening. And often people want to find more detailed information about your audience's background, interests, and motivations. And you can do some intentional outreach. So you could send a survey in your newsletter. You could add some optional questions to your donation or sign-up forms. Or if you've got a core group of supporters who you know well, you could message them directly and invite them to share a little bit more. And over time, these insights add up and they help you to develop audience personas and really deepen the relationship that you have with your community. And once you've gathered that data, both quantitative and qualitative, the next step is really important because it's about interpreting what it actually tells you. So it's about turning those numbers into insights and asking, what does this mean for your organization? What does it tell you about your audience? And most importantly, what should you do next based on this information? So you go from observing trends to then making strategic decisions. So if you look at your best performing content, you can think about, what do these posts have in common? Is it the topic, the visual style, the format, the timing? And then that gives you clues as to what your audience wants to see from you. And you can do the same with your lower performing content as well, and really get the use out of the data that's available to you. So the goal here is to build a clear picture of what's resonating and to know how best to engage with your audience, to tailor your content, to tailor your messaging, but to think about how we then turn that data into pictures that represent your different audiences. We're going to talk about personas, and for that, I'm going to hand back to Simran to talk to us about what those are.
Thank you, Jasmine. So yes, let's bring this to life by looking at how to apply all the audience insights that Jasmine has just talked us through to a digital strategy tool called Personas. So after researching and gaining insights into your audience, you can create these personas to deepen the understanding of who they are. And personas allow you to enhance your content and communications, enabling you to effectively reach and engage your target audience. And this process involved narrowing your focus rather than trying to appeal to everyone with every message, so allowing you to realistically identify and connect with your specific audience. So before we move on, I'm going to launch a quick poll and ask you if anyone here today, let me end the last one, has an existing or has worked with personas before. No worries if you don't know what a persona is yet. We're going to be looking a little bit further into them. But if you have, do let us know and vote in the poll, or even post in the chat if you have any other extra information to share. So we've got some votes coming in, and we've got an even split between yes, but not really using them, and also no, I don't know what what personas are, or kind of how it relates to your organization. So let's look a little bit further into what these personas are. So a persona is a fictional but data-informed representation of a key audience group. So we want you to think of it as a character that you create that embodies the traits, motivations, challenges, and needs of a specific segment of your audience. So they're not real people, but they're grounded in real data. So they're a blend of what Jasmine was going through. So it's a blend of your quantitative and your qualitative insights. You might look at website analytics, email engagement, social media interactions, and combine that with things like survey responses or interviews to build a well-rounded picture of who this person might be. And the goal is to bring your audience to life. So instead of then targeting everyone, you'll be instead crafting your content for someone specific. And as you build out your persona, you'll then eventually start to uncover what motivates them to engage with your organization, what barriers might be stopping them from taking action, and also how you can communicate in ways that are relevant and meaningful to them. So, for example, one audience group might be driven by lived experiences, another might be driven by professional interests, and each will respond to very different language, content, and calls to action. So personas are useful not just for marketers, but across your whole team. They help everyone stay aligned and consistent when planning content, campaigns, or services. And they also help you set clearer goals. So rather than broadcasting a single message to everyone, personas help you define what action you want each group to take and also how to guide them there. So, at the heart of it, personas are about humanizing your audience. You'll be using data that you already have to create something that is tangible and relatable. And so it's going to be someone you can actually picture when making your decisions. So let's have a look at an example. This is an example of an audience persona for the American Cancer Society. So for anyone who isn't familiar with this organization, the American Cancer Society provides educational content to their audience. They direct individuals to health services and information, advocate for access to healthcare and services, and also provide health services such as screening and support. So what I want you to do is to maybe thinking about the services that they offer, I want you to have a think about who you think might interact with American Cancer Society's digital channels, and also what might that persona look like. Also, if you want to go further, let me know what you think, which platforms these target audiences might live on. So I give everyone a minute to have a think. Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on, but only because we've gone a step further and created that persona for you. So based on, oh, we've got an answer come through from Mivunyi who says the person should look like a doctor, and I think Instagram is their channel. That's a really good one. Let me just go back to the previous slide. So you've noticed that because this organization signposts to health information, they're going to provide information that's very helpful for a doctor to have when they are then communicating with other patients or kind of trying to top up their own knowledge. And we've also have Doreen sharing health. Yeah, so they're definitely going to try and operate in the health sector. Legacy has said that as we have diverse persons with disabilities, we need to create a diverse persona. I think that's more for your organization. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So you're all right. So here we have, we've created a persona. We've just named her Patricia. So Patricia is a fictional character. So she doesn't exist, but she gives us an idea of the kind of demographic of people who might then engage with American Cancer Society. So Patricia, we're going to be saying, is 38 years old. She lives in Texas. And actually, she works as a teacher. She's recovered from breast cancer and is an active member of her church community. So she's passionate about women's health and access to healthcare. And from doing some audience research into similar demographics, American Cancer Society can assume that Facebook would be the best platform to target someone like Patricia, as she might use Facebook to keep in touch with her friends and family. So we have a really cool tool to kind of help make this process of building a persona a lot more interesting and exciting, and also simpler for you. So I'm really excited to introduce you to this exciting feature, which is our persona creator, which helps you craft an audience persona and also offers immediate feedback. So I'm going to just share my screen and make this bigger. Okay, so this is how you use our persona tool. So once you log into Lightful Social Platform, you'll be able to head on to, if you look on the left-hand side menu, there's a section here that says personas. And actually, I've already created some, so I'm going to go to one that I've previously made. So I'm going to go into Mary. So this is a complete version of what a persona will look like once you've made it in this tool. And this is what the result you're left with. And you can actually download this as a PDF. But you could also update your persona. So I'm going to go and update persona. So it constantly changes, and you could constantly go back and like make changes. But this is what the process you have to go through to before you get to that PDF page. So when you make your persona, you're asked to think about whether they're a service user, a donor, supporter, or other. And this whole tool just takes you through a lot of helpful questions to consider, such as what their interests are, what you think their occupation is, where you think they live, their age range, gender, and it also gets you to think a little bit deeper about their behavior online and how long you think they spend online. So as you keep going through, you could just fill this in. It also asks you to think about values that you think will connect with them. It's also a fun feature where you could choose a face for your persona tool. And then at the end, you're asked to give some information about your organization. The best thing about this and what makes this tool AI is once you've finished it, you can click on Finish and Review, and then you can actually select Yes, get AI feedback. And once you do that, on the right-hand side, you can see that our AI assistant gives you some questions to consider. So for instance, it says that we've kind of maybe created one persona for maybe something that should be two separate personas. So it's definitely worth considering this AI feedback after you've made it, just to think about any gaps that you may have overlooked. And one of the most exciting things about this persona tool is once you've connected your social media accounts, if you go on to create a post and you're thinking about posting something maybe on Instagram, let's say, I'm going to click continue. Once you've added your media and your caption, you can actually cater this to a certain persona that you've made. So for instance, I'm going to look for Mary. Oh, I can't find, there she is. So based on my persona that I made for Mary, I'm going to say, click on give feedback specifically catered to the persona I made for Mary, and then it should come up with feedback for that. So that's definitely a very exciting tool. I'd recommend everyone to kind of have a play around with. And I can see that Sabina has sent a link to that in the chat. Now going to hand it over to Jasmine.
Great, thank you. Yeah, do keep messages coming through if you have any questions about that persona tool. But yeah, we can go through those in one-to-ones as well. And actually what's really important is once you've built your personas, this is where you then apply what you've learned about your audience across your communication. So this means then you can think about answers to those challenges you shared earlier of which channels are most relevant to this persona, what type of content should I create, what call to actions, what stories are going to be most likely to engage them. So it helps you to know what to say, but also where and how to say it, exactly as you were saying when you suggested where the American Cancer Society persona might be active. And that's exactly what you need to do next, is to then think in that example of the Patricia persona, is thinking about what channels, what content is going to resonate with them, putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about that across your channels. So for social media, it's thinking about what type of content will they be using and what kind of format might they like to look at. And actually, we're going to go through some very quick examples. I know we're quite tight on time, but let's look at this example post we have, and we can play that while I talk through. And it's a post from the World Food Programme, which shows how they are tailoring crisis communications to audiences like journalists, researchers, and fact-driven supporters who are looking for that reliable, on-the-ground information. And this is written with that audience in mind, as opposed to a different audience. And it has storytelling, it's got really important details, and the caption, we can always share a link afterwards so you can read it, but it kind of has a bit of like a report style to it. It's very clear, it's very factual, it's got a lot of context. And this is really effective because it then builds trust with those audiences by speaking into what those audiences need to see. If we go on to the next slide as an example of how you might do this, a similar thing in an email, and this is an email from Charity Water, and it's been sent to donors about a campaign they're running, and it reflects the relationship the reader has with the nonprofit because they've already donated. So they're being spoken to in a different way to somebody who's never donated would be being spoken to in an email. And then a quick example of a website. People were saying earlier, actually, how do you reach your different audiences? And a website is a great way to do this because you can lay it out with buttons for your different audiences. So in this instance, the menu has a section for families, for volunteers, and for professionals. So this organisation has identified these are our 3 main groups. We'll give a button for each one to navigate to the information that's most relevant to them, which I think is really helpful. So I think that's probably a quick view of how you might be able to tailor your content. And we'll share learning resources with you to help with this afterwards. And actually, maybe I'll hand over to Simran to talk through what we'd recommend you doing after today, and then we can support going into any more detail that you might need to as well.
Thank you. So yeah, here's how you can keep building on what we've covered here today. So first, we'd like for you to identify your audiences. So we have some Lightful Academy courses that are designed to help you with this, and you'll also be able to find this in your Bridge Month 2 playlist. And Sabina has also sent the link to that in the chat. And also, we'd like for you to have a look at your Facebook or Instagram insights and explore who you think your audience may be. Have a play with the demographic section and just think a little bit further about what your persona may look like. And then after that, use the persona creator tool to to get started in building your targeted communications. And we'll be sending these next steps in an email along with the session recording, so that you don't have to write these down now. And also, please do take some time to join our WhatsApp group as well as our Facebook group. We send messages on our WhatsApp for when, or reminders for when there's a session, so it may be helpful for some of you to join. And finally, we have a really exciting bonus session coming up for our Bridge participants and alumni community. And this time we'll be joined by Berche Alte, the director of Giving Tuesday Europe Hub, for an inspiring and practical session called Countdown to Giving Tuesday. And the session will be taking place on Thursday, the 6th of November at 4 p.m. GMT. So yeah, to get more information on this, you'll receive an email with more information on this, but you will need to register to attend. So definitely click on the link that Sabina will send in the chat to get yourself registered in. I can see that the final poll has launched, so thank you everyone for voting. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions here today, but if you do join our WhatsApp group, you can send any messages or questions that you have on there. If not, feel free to book in a one-to-one or even send an email, and we're more than happy to help. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us here today. I hope you found it helpful, and I look forward to seeing you at your next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.